This is the morning of the 3rd of August, 2024. There's a lot of information here, so grab yourself a cup of coffee, sit back, and listen. This was put up by Susan Daniels on August 2nd, 2024. If you tuned in to Zolan Report when I was posting videos on the reported killing of Osama Bin Laden, you'd know the truth. Susan Daniels on August 2nd wrote, "Obama didn't kill Osama Bin Laden." Reposted excerpt from The Rubbish Hauler's Wife versus Barack Obama, a true story. Obama was in trouble in the polls in 2011, and he needed a big ta-da if he was going to be immaculated. After the 2012 election, as the late Rush Limbaugh would say, and thus the stage was set for the incredible sham of Bin Laden death by SEALs. My interest was piqued by a simple comment made to me. I was told that a friend's son-in-law was a sailor on the USS Carl Vinson, the ship where the helicopter landed with the body of Bin Laden. Before they landed, however, all 5,000 sailors were herded below deck. Why do that? Would they not want the largest audience possible for such an auspicious event? Researching dozens of sources revealed quick to me that the death of Bin Laden was a sham and that Obama would have to pull Lazarus for it to be real. A neighbor of the house in Obadadad, where the SEALs were supposed to have killed Bin Laden, told a local newspaper that Bin Laden had never been in their town. Someone would have seen him. He also said he saw several bodies of men in uniform fall out of the second helicopter when the tail hit the wall surrounding the compound. Obama neglected to mention the death of any SEALs when he was boasting about the alleged successful operation, which he used to ride back into the White House. I was determined to write something about his lie, and I did. On December 26, 2001, in Egypt's Al-Waf, the Pakistan Observer newspaper Le Figaro, a French newspaper Radio France International, and Fox News each claimed that Bin Laden died a peaceful death in Tora Bora Mountains on December 16, 2001. Apparently he died of renal kidney failure. Surrounded by 30 members of his family and members of the Taliban, an Al-Qaeda Bin Laden death notice was posted in Arabic, and the translation from Arabic to English from two credible sources, documented and notarized, reads as follows. Reports on death of Bin Laden and funeral took place 10 days ago in Islamabad at UA. A prominent official of Afghan Taliban announced yesterday the death of Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda leader, and referred that bin Laden was suffering from dangerous lung complications and died normally and quietly. This official, who refused to mention his name, affirmed during a statement to Pakistan Observer newspaper that he attended the funeral of bin Laden by himself and saw the face of bin Laden before burial in Tora Bora 10 days ago. Moreover, he referred that the funeral attended by 30 fighters of Al-Qaeda, family members, and some friends of the Taliban. A barrage of gunshots fired to farewell him to his final resting place. This official emphasized the difficulty, the determination of the place where bin Laden was buried, and his grave was leveled to the ground in accordance with Wahhabism, the doctrine which he belongs. In addition, he affirmed the possibility of obliteration of the place of burial due to the contentious aerial bombing 2 weeks ago of Tora Bora, but he does not expect that the American forces will be able to find the body of bin Laden. Bin Laden had been in poor health for several years. In March 2000, Asia Week published a Hong Kong expressed concern for bin Laden's health. He was described as having a kidney infection that is propagating itself to the liver and requires specialized treatment. Additionally, the story said a mobile dialysis machine was delivered to his hideout in Kandahar in the first half of 2000. According to one source, bin Laden's move for health reasons was not the first. Between 1996 and 1998, Osama bin Laden went to Dubai several times for business. According to the front page story on Le Figaro on October 31st, 2001, bin Laden flew from Qatar, Pakistan on July 4th to Dubai airport and was admitted to the American hospital in Dubai, where he stayed in one of two VIP suites until July 14th. He arrived with his personal doctor, a male Algerian nurse, and 4 bodyguards. He was treated in the urology department. While at the hospital, bin Laden had surgery performed by American urologist Dr. Terry Caldwell of renal failure, according to Le Figaro. No attempt was made to arrest him during his 2-week stay in the hospital, shedding doubt on the U.S. administration's resolve to track down Osama bin Laden. Caldwell also treated him in 1996 and 1998. In a copy of Le Figaro in November 2001 was the following. Barely a few days ago, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld stated, "It will be difficult to find him, bin Laden, and extradite him. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack." The U.S. could have ordered bin Laden arrest and extradition in Dubai that July, but then they would have had a pretext for continuing a money-making war. Fueling the industrial military complex. That's what it's always about, folks. Le Figaro continued. During his hospitalization, Osama bin Laden received visits of several family members, Saudi and Emirate personalities, in the course of the same stay. The local CIA representative, who many people in Dubai know, was seen taking the metal elevator to the hospital to go to Osama bin Laden's room. A few days later, the CIA man boasted to some friends that he had visited the Saudi billionaire, according to authorized sources. The CIA agent was called by his headquarters on July 15th, a day after bin Laden's departure from Qatar. Richard Lebrave, a Radio France International who had a contact working at the hospital, identified the CIA agent as Larry Mitchell, whose business cards identified him as consular agent. Mitchell was known as a colorful and expatriate social circles. He did not try to hide the fact that he worked for the company. While hospitalized, bin Laden was also visited by Prince Turki Al Faisal, head of the Saudi General Intelligence Department. Mitchell was seen at the hospital getting off the hospital elevator and entering bin Laden's room about 8 weeks before the Twin Towers were destroyed. The story is that despite the destruction bin Laden had caused and the deaths to Americans previously, Mitchell was trying to arrange some kind of agreement with bin Laden to call for a truce between bin Laden and America. Mitchell did not stay long and made the mistake of boasting about meeting with bin Laden. He was immediately recalled on July 15 to Langley and was fired. According to Richard Lebrave, author of The Corridors of Terror, said that he was told that Turkey arranged the meeting. The contact told Lebrave, by organizing this meeting, Turkey thought he could start direct negotiations between the Saudi millionaire Osama bin Laden and the CIA on one fundamental point, that Osama bin Laden and his supporters end their hostilities against America's interests. In exchange, the CIA and the Saudi intelligence service undertook to allow Osama to return to his native country, even though he was stripped of the Saudi nationality in July 1994. The Dubai meeting was a failure, the author said. Again, from October 31st, Le Figaro newspaper, the contacts between the CIA and bin Laden date back to 1979. When representing the family firm in Istanbul, he began to recruit volunteers for Arab Islamic World to the Afghan resistance against Red Army, investigating the August 1998 attack against U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The FBI investigators discovered that the traces left by explosions came from a military explosive of the U.S. Army. Does that sort of surprise anyone? Huh? That the explosives came from a military explosive of the U.S. Army, and that this explosive had been delivered 3 days earlier to Arab Afghanistan The famous international volunteer brigades engaged with Osama bin Laden during the Afghan war against the Soviet army. For global research, Osama bin Laden was well known, well-paid CIA asset used over a long period by more than one administration to fight their proxy wars. Originally, he was recruited during the Carter administration to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. He was subsequently used and armed to bolster the Muslim cause, where it could be applied as a proxy force in civil wars, including Bosnia in the 1990s. Who was Osama bin Laden? Tim Osman, Osama bin Laden. Tim Osman has become better known as Osama bin Laden. Tim Osman was the name assigned to him by the CIA for his tour of the U.S. and U.S. military bases in search of political support and armaments. There is some evidence that Tim Osman visited the White House. There was certainty that Tim Osman toured some U.S. military bases, even receiving special demonstrations of the latest equipment. Why hasn't this been reported in the major media? The arrangement continued until bin Laden, called Tim Osman by the CIA, returned to Afghanistan in 1998. Arab specialist Antonia Sufra was not surprised by the alleged CIA bin Laden ties. He said until last minute, CIA agents hoped bin Laden would return to U.S. command, as was the case before 1998. Bin Laden, the world's most sought-after criminal, was allowed to leave Dubai with no interference from the U.S. government, even though there was an arrest warrant for him and a $5 million price on his head. Neither Turkey nor Mitchell understood what was planned for September the 11th. Paul Joseph Watson, book Order of Chaos, said the government had previously been alerted that there were going to be attacks on American soil, and airplanes were going to be used as weapons. That's all bullshit. In a section called Warning of the Eve of the Attack, Watson writes, Newsweek twice reported that top Pentagon officials had got a warning of the impending attack on September the 10th and canceled their flights for the next day. This confirms that the official knew both the location and imminent attacks and the method of using jetliners as bombs. From Race, June 2001, German intelligence, the BND, warns the CIA and Israel, the Middle Eastern terrorists, are planning to hijack commercial aircraft to use as weapons to attack important symbols of America and Israel culture. An Iranian man phoned U.S. law enforcement to warn of an imminent attack on the World Trade Center in the weeks of September 9th. German police confirmed the calls, but state that the U.S. Secret Service would not reveal any further information. There's your Secret Service again, huh? So when and how did Osama bin Laden die? According to a death notice, it did not occur in like the SEAL claims. Was Operation Neptune Spear named after the trident of the Navy's Special Warfare insignia, a complete hoax to improve Obama's failing poll numbers and distract from the questionable birth certificate? There were too many unanswered questions from the start. Were the photos from bin Laden's assassination videos? The government said they were too gruesome and would pose a grave risk to national security. The government had no trouble showing a picture of Saddam Hussein with a rope around his neck. When then President Barack Obama was on 60 Minutes after the raid, he said this was a very difficult decision, in part because the evidence we had was not absolutely conclusive. How about the Photoshop picture of Obama in a Situation Room? A child's size, Obama sitting by the side of the table watching the SEALs in action, while someone sat in the big leather chair at the end of the table. Obama would never have sat in a peon's chair. Obama's ego is too big that on Trump's inauguration day, Obama had to be reminded that he had to walk behind the president. Situation Room fake photo. Leon Panetta later admitted in his book, Worthy Fights, a memoir of leadership in war and peace, that there was no live feed to Abatamon during the raid for the first 20 to 35 minutes of the raid. The pictures the media led people to believe was Hillary Clinton with her hand at her mouth and Obama staring fiercely ahead, was not taken during the attack. International Business Times reported while the photo ran on many newspapers and websites the next morning as if it were taken during the Obama's address to the nation the night before, that was actually the result of an elaborate post-speech production. As President Obama continued his 9-minute address in front of just one main network camera, the photographers were held outside the room by staff and asked to remain completely silent, writer-photographer Jason Reed explained in his blog. Once Obama was off the air, we were escorted in front of the teleprompter, and the president then reenacted the walkout and the first 30 seconds of the statement for us. Paul Joseph Watson, who wrote the article containing Reed's comments, continued, "The staging of Obama's speech is embarrassing, but the staging of the Situation Room photos, which was heavily promoted by the establishment media, falsely presented as evidence that Osama bin Laden and Clinton saw the assassination of Osama live, and used by the White House to lend credence to the fairy tale they were scripting, are damning." Panetta in his book also described at length the steps taken to dump the body. 300 pounds of iron chains were put inside the body bag, as well to ensure that the body would sink, he wrote. The bag body was placed on a white table at the rail of the ship. The table was tipped over to drop the body into the sea. It was so heavy that it dragged the table with it, and the body sank quickly out of sight. The table bobbed on the surface. Initially, there was reluctance to go ahead with Operation Neptune Spear. There was doubt that bin Laden was in a Baghdad compound. It had been under surveillance for 2 months, and no one had actually seen bin Laden. There was a man who walked around inside the walled building the evening with several men, but they all appeared to be the same height. Bin Laden was 6'4" and 165 pounds. He would have stood out. But the vaginous Obama, looking for a big splash, ordered the attack to go ahead. His approval ratings were low and a sketchy birth certificate kept coming up. This was a perfect distraction and his big chance to demonstrate his leadership skills. The story about the raid kept changing. The first version of the media was that bin Laden's henchmen engaged the SEALs in a gunfight and that bin Laden was armed. The media then claimed that he was not armed, but was cowering behind his wife. If so, why not take him as a captive? He was supposed to be the leader of the global network terrorists. Wouldn't it make sense to question him? On May 3, 2011, Obama's spokesman, Jay Carney, came out with a new and improved version over the one told the day before. No, bin Laden was not armed. No, he was not cowering behind his wife, and there had been no fierce gunfight with the SEALs. One has to wonder if bin Laden did not pose a threat. Was he not taken alive? The people living in Baghdad had a few things to say, too, according to the 21st Century Clarity Press. One of the helicopters crashed during the landing, but the government line was that no one was hurt. Mohammed Bashir, who lived across from the compound, said he saw dead bodies in a crashed helicopter. The helicopter was then destroyed by SEALs before they left. A BBC reporter interviewed 50 residents of the city, and only one thought that bin Laden lived there. Another man said the compound resident was a neighbor named Abba Khan, and he was the one actually killed. Another unanswered question was why was bin Laden's pick a compound within a few miles of Kalur Military Academy, the West Point of Pakistan. He was a terrorist at large with a $5 million price on his head. The bin Laden body was allegedly taken in a Black Hawk helicopter. Another article said an Osprey, another said a Chinook, to the USS Carl Version in the North Arabian Sea, about 850 miles from Baghdad, where bin Laden was supposedly killed. See a photograph of the USS Carl Vinson. The ship had 5,000 sailors, pilots, and crew members aboard. All were ordered below deck before the body was dropped into the sea. Why would they not be allowed on deck? Perhaps because even a body bag of a person could tell if a body was 6'4" and 165 pounds or not. A CBS News report on June 16 welcomed the 5,000 seamen on the ship returning to San Diego, where they were sworn to secrecy about their historic mission. But while their historic mission was in progress and helicopters were landing, They were all below deck. Sailors allegedly were ordered to avoid talking about the operation. Rear Admiral Samuel Perez, Division Strike Group Commander, when asked about the morale, said, "I think everybody was pretty stoked. I think that first week of May, everybody was sitting there looking around very proud to have been part of this piece of history." Perez was quiet, the fubulist. Petty Officer First Class Robert Ray Lewson of Maine went even further. "We were able to go out there and accomplish our mission. We met or exceeded every goal we were supposed to meet." He was a Perez wannabe. But emails between military leaders tell a different story. There were only a handful of people present when the body was dropped into the water. Judicial Watch, through a FOIA request, received heavy redacted copies of the emails, some of which said, "Former Army Derek Frost, CDR, sent on May the 3rd, 2011, to Reynolds, Eric J., LCDR. Eric, CENTCOM, and OSD are asking if sailors knew what was occurring or who the burial was for. Any insights? I know that few that knew anything, quite mainly in our leadership, and of course you, the deck pirates, not looking for an actual number, but a more qualitative response." CDR, only a small group of the leadership was informed, less than a dozen. Any sailors watched the burial? No sailors watched. Throughout the emails, the subject of the emails was package delivered or FedEx delivery. FedEx delivery. I remember doing a video on those two transgender tennis players when she gave birth. I said it was delivered by FedEx or UPS. The entire maternity ward was shut down. The last email from Derek Frost to Reynolds: "Would like you to write up a brief statement about VIN involvement. Not a lot of specific but general terms of what VIN role was, as if though it's a statement coming from the commanding officer. I have talked with Task Force about this, and they agree that having something in the can for later is prudent." People were questioning why no photos were released and doubted the authenticity of the burial at sea story. The story hinted that photos would be released later. John Brennan, then Barack Obama's counter-terrorist advisor. John Brennan is a Muslim and he speaks perfect Arabic. He went to one of those meetings that Muslims all go to. "We are going to do everything we can to make sure that nobody has any basis to deny that we got Osama Bin Laden. Brennan pants must be set on fire every day." Mohammed Al-Khalya Dubai Grand Mufa said of the Bin Laden burial, "They can say they buried him at sea, but they cannot say they did it according to Islam. Sea burials are permissible for Muslims in extraordinary circumstances. This is not one of them." I actually did videos on this. Muslim law has strict rules about burials. Rule about burial of the dead body. Issue 620. It is obligatory to bury a dead body in the ground, so deep that its smells do not come out, and the beasts of prey do not dig it out. And if there is danger of such beasts digging it out, then the grave should be made solid with bricks, etc. Issue 623. If a person dies on ship and if there's no fear of decay of the dead body, if there's no problem in retaining it for someone time on a ship, it should be kept on and buried in the ground. By dumping the body at sea, there would be no way to prove who it was. Osama bin Laden, believed to be buried, as his death notice says, in Tora Bora Mountains, is an unmarked grave because Wahhabis do not believe in leaving anything that might become a site for veneration. 2 days later, Admiral William R. Reckon had all photos, videos, and documents destroyed because, according to the government, Navy protocol demanded it. However, in Record Management section of the Department of Navy Records Management Program 1 says, within the legal framework provided by law and referencing, the DONS RM Department of Navy Record Management Program has as its principal goals preservation of records having long-term permanent worth, because of this continuing administration, legal, scientific, or historical values. Would Operation Neptune Spear not have significant historic value? A spokesman for the American hospital CIA emphatically denied that Bin Laden had never been in Dubai or was treated there. The entire story has been disclaimed by two news organizations that broke the story. Le Figaro and Radio France International stand by the reporting and were able to confirm its authenticity. It's time to come clean about the farce involving Bin Laden and the SEALs and to stop pretending that the U.S. government didn't know about the impending 9/11 threat on the Twin Towers. Well, sure they knew. They're the ones that did it, for Christ's sake. As earlier stated, Newsweek twice reported that top Pentagon officials had got a warning of the impending attack on September 10th and canceled their flights for the next day. This confirmed that these officials knew both the location and the imminent attack and method of using jetliners as bombs. If the planes had hit the towers 1 hour later in the day, 50,000 people would have been at work and died. 3,000 dead must have been an unacceptable number for the Bush administration to get us into war with the lie about weapons of mass destruction. And Dick Cheney was about to make a lot of money, of course. Cheney claimed he was no longer involved in Halliburton, which has spun off a Houston-based company called KBR. It made $39.5 billion from the war out of a total of $138 billion the government spent just on armaments. Corruption was as high as $80 billion by war profiteers. After the alleged death of Bin Laden, then Vice President Joe Biden outrageously announced that the raid was conducted by SEAL Team 6. No one ever is supposed to talk about SEAL operations. It forced Obama to repeat the same information the next day. 3 months later, in August 2001, a military helicopter was shot down in Afghanistan. The dead included 22 SEALs, most of whom belonged to SEAL Team 6. Dead men tell no tales. I told you, folks, it was all bullshit. And it did achieve its objective. It got that crack-smoking fag another 4-year term. Like I've said in countless other videos, we can't move this country forward until we clean up its past. And Obama needs to be held accountable. That's just sort of what I think. I can't do this alone, folks. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.